Hello, and thanks for listening to your SCAMLE's exclusive podcast, ExplorED. On these episodes, you will enjoy exclusive interviews with some names you recognize and some people you'll be meeting for the first time. In each of our episodes, we will ask you to think and grow and reflect as a professional educator. If you aren't yet a member of SCAMLE, we encourage you to join today. More information can be found at www.scamle.org. There, find out more information about membership, conferences, and professional development opportunities. And don't forget to join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My name is Sarah Evanson Atkinson, and I serve as the Professional Development Director for your SCAMLE. I am an educator of 21 years and a past SCAMLE president as well.
In this episode of the ExplorED podcast, I sat down with Josh Snyderman, the Vice President of LearningBlade. While he does have an impressive resume and plenty of reasons to step to the side of the hallway when he's walking through, he was one of the most down-to-earth practitioners I have spoken with in a very long time. He has been with LearningBlade for 7 years and has watched it grow into the educational product it is today. But he's a teacher first, a STEMinist first, a dad first. He acknowledges that while we are enough for our students, kids can't be what they can't see. And we must be aware of our own willingness to innovate, question, and think critically about our practice in order for our students to witness the processes and skills we employ to deliver quality instruction to them. What's more, that instruction must illuminate the relevance of today to the future of each student. It's not just, are we ever going to use this, or are we there yet, or when is this class over? Relevance breeds engagement and has the power to deepen understanding and heighten rigor. That's a lot. Please enjoy this episode with Joshua Snyderman. All right, so we are here today with Joshua Snyderman. He is the Vice President of LearningBlade, and I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a second, but I first want to say welcome aboard.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome. Okay, so Joshua, tell us what you do and where your professional passions lie and what you're up to and why our membership should care. Because let me just say, the membership that was at the conference, you received wide acclaim. Your name came up again and again and again as someone that they wanted to see more of, which is super exciting to me. I love that. That's a really big moment. So tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Exciting to me as well. So hi, I'm Josh Snyderman. I'm with LearningBlade. Prior to being at LearningBlade, I was a geologist and then a 10-year middle school math science teacher. Where I had an opportunity to be a Albert Einstein Distinguished Education Fellow. And that really opened up my mind to a different way of thinking about classroom education and its connections to the workforce, because at the Department of Energy, we were looking at community college as the training space for the 21st century clean energy community and workforce. And so then I was like, whoa, wait a second. I taught clean energy in my classroom. It was one of my favorite, but I never talked about community college. So I was like, that's wild and interesting. And then as I was at the DOE, I was really focused in on something called the Energy Literacy Framework. But part of the team I was on, we were working on initiatives to expose more girls in STEM in particular, expand the pipeline of young women interested in the STEM career paths. And that's when I crossed paths with Sheila Boyington, the owner of LearningBlade, who happens to be also the state chair for Million Women Mentors. And so all of these three things, workforce development, my passion for STEM education, being a father of 3 Latino daughters, and calling myself a STEMinist, combined with me then coming to LearningBlade to help promote middle school STEM career education. So it's STEM, but it's a career focus, right? Making sure, as I like to say, kids can't be what they can't see. So that's what we're trying to do, is exposure through standardized math, English, science questions.
So what would you say, in your opinion, what would you say is missing from the current landscape in your average run-of-the-mill middle school who maybe is saying, we've got a lot of programs that are running, but STEM and STEAM is not, it's not readily available to us, maybe because we feel like it's too expensive, or we don't have the resources, or we don't have the trained personnel to deliver such a thing. What's missing from that landscape, do you think?
Yeah, great question. I see a couple things I think are missing. And as you said, I would just say STEM's missing from too many schools. And Learning Blade is like in South Carolina, a free option. So it's learningblade.com/SC, and you can get a free license. But I think, when I was teaching, part of it's about, I think my success came from having school leaders that supported me trying new things. So I think what's missing is a environment of trying new things, right? Like Learning Blade might be new for you. And because when you try that new STEM thing, then you're all of a sudden like, you figure out how to do it better and better. And then all of a sudden you're this amazing math teacher that's doing STEM stuff, right? I think that's missing. I personally get on the soapbox all the time and I say, the discussion around community college is just missing. It's absolutely missing from many schools. Some teachers do it. Gosh, they do such a stand-up job of integrating stuff. Let me give you an example, Sarah. In my science classroom, I never once thought to invite a welder or electrician when I was talking about the properties of metals or circuits, right? I would invite the PhD theorist on how electrons flow, right, through outer space and electrons, and or how metallic bonds, and we can zap them with nuclear peptide. We can do I tried to get to the wide, funkiest PhD science level when I just needed my kids to understand there's awesome careers out there somewhere. So that's the last thing I think that we've been working really hard at Learning Blade, and personally also my side projects, is just adding career lens to what we teach. When I was a teacher, my students asked me all the time, when will I ever use this, Teacher Snyderman? And I would be like, I'd have my question. I kind of found it annoying because I had just spent the weekend planning a lab that would blow your mind. So I thought my lab was enough, right? Like, this was awesome, hands-on fun, let's get busy. And you're still asking me that question. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? But now my biggest recognition is that, oh my gosh, every middle school teacher gets this question, every single one. So maybe answering the relevance of today to my future is actually critical, like super critical. So I'd say that's the biggest missing puzzle piece.
So is that in part or in all what Learning Blade does?
Yeah, so we have 400 10-minute little math science lessons, and every single one is tied to a career or technology. So we're showing students. So for example, we have, students have heard of an engineer because they know STEM, right? But do they know logistics engineer? We have an hour of curriculum on logistics engineer, mechanical engineer, nuclear engineer, power engineer, biomedical engineer, industrial engineer. So those are some careers. Then we've got lessons on welders and mechatronics and industrial things, and lessons on environmental protection. So we have 100 careers and technologies, and every single one has a math, science, English, and social studies lesson to try and show that any of your standards that you're learning in school is somehow related to the future workforce.
I love that. I love that. So you said something earlier in your introduction, and you talked about the energy literacy framework.
Yeah.
The English teacher in me is riveted.
So yes, so that was a project I helped run at the Department of Energy. And so NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, started out with climate literacy. And climate literacy is like these 7 bold concepts that if you understand these, you understand climate and its impact. So for example, climate and weather are different, right? So if you figuring out these 7 bold things. So the Department of Energy said, hold on, right? If you understand these 7 energy principles, then you have a much better understanding of energy. So the idea that energy is global, right? And that it affects communities locally. And so really trying to understand, and that's a big deal now with equity and environmental justice in the energy space. But the energy literacy principles is a framework from which any teacher that's teaching energy lessons should read this 10, 12-page document, and it'll give them oh, wait, how am I incorporating energy principle number 3 or number 5 into what I'm doing? So that way you get a well-rounded understanding of energy. I will say, as part of the fun of that framework, I did a TED-Ed video that has about 1 million views on the energy of the Earth.
So you talk a lot about it in your discussion here. You talk a lot about the interconnectedness of not only, I mean, if we take it down to a really, really specific level, like, our students are very interconnected, more so than they can recognize. Their learning is more interconnected, more so than they can recognize. And then as you raise the scope, like, the web doesn't get any looser. In fact, I think it probably gets tighter.
Correct.
How can the average, I mean, because sometimes I think teachers, they listen to the, a really great educator and they go, well, that's great for them, but I could never do that.
Mm-hmm.
How can we harness the power of that interconnectivity? I think there's power in that.
Yeah, and I love the way your brain works, Sarah. So first of all, it all comes back down to, is your school teaching in silos, right? Mm-hmm. And can you do so? How do we harness that interconnectedness? I would say would be in your classroom. You can break the silo of how you teach. So, for example, my science classroom, like, I always had students doing art projects because every team I ever created had to make a logo and design it, right? And so they were doing logo design, and then they had to make a slogan and a jingle, and then we did the science stuff. So every project always had that because that's art and it's music. So I tried to break down the silo a little bit in my class, but I think if you could just have once a year, once a semester, once a quarter, once a month, where something that English teachers talking about is somehow interrelated to what's happening in science class or math and science, because I mean, we just can't continue to make kids think that math class is how math is by itself in the world. Mm-hmm. Or science, right? Like, as you mentioned, they're all super interconnected now. So, not every school is going to be this progressive school that does all this, interdisciplinary work and sort of like the IB curriculum or MYP curriculum. But I think every teacher can make their own effort to integrate a little bit, right? Understand what your colleagues are working on.
Yeah, I agree. Just having the conversation is valuable for you to say, well, I didn't know you were teaching that, because that's what's coming up for me. And I could certainly tip my hat to it, if nothing else.
Or I forget the exact title of the book, The Boy with the Kite or whatever, about the young man in Africa who built a wind turbine in his, community, and it changed why don't you read that in English class as I'm working on this energy curriculum in science class? And we just do that once a year, right? We interconnect what's happening. Right. But I'll say that's what Learning Blade does with math, science, English, and social studies lessons. So when schools choose to use a Learning Blade project, what they're getting is, okay, well, this project might be done in science class, or it might be done in English class or math class, but whenever they do a Learning Blade mission, like the dolphin rescue or the Haiti orphanage mission, they're seeing the interconnectedness of their standards to a topic.
Do you want to let the cat out of the bag? Because you said the word free. And a lot of people in South Carolina are going, what? Free? There's free. That a product like this could be free. So why should I take advantage of it? Because what you're talking about is really high level interdisciplinary, literacy and interdisciplinary learning, which is phenomenal. But if I'm overwhelmed by what I got already.
Well, so great question. The feedback I get from teachers, and I've been at Learning Blade for 7 years and helped it grow now to hundreds of thousands of students and millions of lessons completed. The feedback I get, and I don't say that to brag, I say that I got a lot of teacher feedback, is, wow, this is a lifesaver. I had one teacher call it duct tape because it held everything together. But you and I know, Sarah, on my best day, and I think I was a pretty good classroom teacher, there were days where I still needed a little support, whether it's let's pull up a video at the last minute, let's do something there's always that changing dynamic. The school schedule just changed. Something's always changing in school. Learning Blade has 400 10-minute chunks, means you always have a little lesson you can fall back on. Right? Oh, you finished. And so a lot of usage is for early finishers. Oh, you finished early. I got something you can work on. Let's do some career connections with math or science. Oh, bell ringer. I need a bell ringer today. Oh, let's do an engineering bell ringer from Learning Blade. You're sick or sub day. It's just, once you're logged in, you have it. And then what do you have? A toolbox of new stuff that is easy to implement with students. So I get a lot of feedback from teachers that, wow, this is really incredibly beneficial to have as a resource in my back pocket. And if I can, in South Carolina, Now that's, sort of the base usage. Let's just use it to when I need it as a support mechanism. South Carolina, the South Carolina Teacher of the Year 2020, Tracy Elmore, 2021, Amy Baldwin, the STEM Educators of the Year in the state, they both love using it, and they use it in different ways. Amy uses it as Learning Blade Fridays. On Fridays, she supports her Project Lead the Way classes with something different. Let's do a little bit of Learning Blade. Tracy Elmore uses it as to supplement her already existing curriculum and add a career lens to it. So I think it's also, so what I'm trying to say is it's flexible in how you want to integrate it.
So talk for a second about, you've got a lot of science teachers in South Carolina who they're nearly at panic mode as they're facing down new standards that are more closely aligned with the national science standards. And it's, this idea of the shifting the focus to this anchoring phenomena and like really become well versed in how to teach science and math for that matter, although science is under the hot seat right now. So how can Learning Blade help them to feel more comfortable in maybe content that they're not 100% sure of right now? Because everything is, there's shifting sands under them and structure right now.
Yeah, and the shifting sands based on the NGSS is this three-dimensional thinking, right? And thinking about performance expectations as well. But of course, the underpinnings of the shifting sand is still disciplinary core ideas. So students need a solid vocabulary to be able to perform and at the expected levels. So I think Learning Blade does a couple things. One, it's providing the growth in the vocabulary in the disciplinary context. So that check. Number two is in terms of engineering practices, like the whole thing's full of engineering practices. So you're getting some of that checked off because that's not in your traditional science textbook that maybe you need to revamp. But in Learning Blade, you've got, like I already said, over 11 hours of engineering careers and their practices, but also many of the technologies involved, solving problems through an engineering mindset. And then I haven't mentioned it yet, but while we have these 400 online lessons, we actually have on the teacher resources page about 100 hours of lesson plans for offline engagement. And so when you're thinking performance expectation and how do I show that my student understands Newton's laws or whatever, we have labs that you can do with kitchen sink materials. We don't sell any materials. We're just like, go ask your kids to bring in some paper towel rolls, and you can do these activities that show an understanding of the core concepts. So I think, but I would also say to teachers, relax, it's gonna be okay. Like you're already awesome, and this doesn't change how awesome you are, it just changes how we describe awesome, but you still got it all.
So we're down to our final question of the podcast, and it's my favorite one. It's the silliest one. Are you ready, Josh? It's the silliest one. Okay, so you get to make a recommendation. Book, podcast, TV show, you name it. What's the one thing that you want to recommend to our membership? Could be work related, could not be. We've heard Yellowstone on here. I mean, that's not work related. For anyone listening, do not show Yellowstone in a middle school classroom. Please do not.
Yeah, no, I don't even know what that is, but yeah.
So one recommendation that you would make to our memberships, they just can't miss.
I have two. I'm going to make one, but I got to make two. So one is, well, try Learning Blade. It's free, learningblade.com/SC, shameless plug. The other is I read a book that I bought and sent to all of my friends. And it's called How Not to Die. It's actually just about healthy eating, right? It's about eating vegetarian, vegan lifestyle. And I still eat plenty of meat. So I'm not trying to say that you're wrong for that. But the book made me recognize that in the educational system, we maybe are failing in how we educate children around healthy habits. And it made me really think that there's something we should and could do there as educators. So I feel like if you read the book or primed yourself on that book, it might just give you this new sense of like passion space for like helping kids live healthier, better lives.